Hello, everybody. A very big hello and a warm welcome to both you, our audience today, and indeed our esteemed panel, who I will introduce very shortly and let them do all the talking. So I'm James Johnston and I head up the alumni team at Sheffield Hallam. As we've discovered since March, online is the new in-person. And so this is the first in a series of web-based engagements where we invite alumni and friends of the university to unpack some of the big issues of the day. We think the role of our community is to support each other, and Sheffield Hallam is certainly here for you. For those of you who don't know, the Hallam Collective is our new online a mentoring and networking platform for alumni and friends of the university. You can check it out at hallamcollective.com, and I encourage you to do so. It's an opportunity for you to network, to find mentors, and we're particularly keen to offer this up as an opportunity to this year's graduating class of 2020. So our aim is to run in conversations through into the autumn. We'll be calling on our friends, our alumni, to talk through and challenge these topics and sector issues which have come up. This is for students, it's for recent graduates and our more wider alumni groups. And it's an opportunity for you to hear first-hand experiences and gain insight into the world beyond our campus. So today's In Conversation is a very important one, and we're reflecting on the issue of race, what this means in the wake of global protest and outrage following the killing of George Floyd by police officers in Minneapolis in the USA. This has shone a light on the huge gaps and inequality for people of colour in society. It's reignited a series of debates about race, white privilege, colonialism, all digested in the media through a myriad of perspectives and opinions. We're asking today, what does this mean to you, to people of colour, and to a disrupted world which is trying to piece itself back together and live with COVID-19? A very quick note to audience members, if you're viewing this during the YouTube premiere session, you can type questions into the chat box, and members of the panel will be around with the alumni team to answer them during the session. Thank you to those people who sent questions in advance, which we'll come to at the end of the session. So most importantly to our panel, they are individuals who are remarkable leaders in their own right, from the world of business, entertainment and academia, all with a warm connection to Sheffield and all who have a very personal story to tell about how racial inequality has impacted on them. Most importantly, we hope you as our audience will leave this session today feeling empowered and inspired to make a positive change through the lens of race. So hello panel, how are you all today?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, really good.
Very good.
So I'm gonna let you introduce yourselves and we'll spend a few minutes kind of by way of introduction, hearing about your connection to Sheffield, which I think is an important thing to unpack. Your journey in your life and career, if that's okay, and can I go to Aaron first?
Sure. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate the time to be able to be a part of this very important conversation, so thank you. Excuse me. I was born in Parsons, Kansas, a small town in Kansas, and left when I was 17. Went into the military after that, did the military, the Army specifically, for 4 years, and then moved to Minnesota and attended a private Catholic all-male college called St. John's University, where I studied, majored in peace studies, nonviolent conflict resolution and mediation. Finished there, moved down to Minneapolis, Minnesota. I have a background in singing as well, although that's not what I studied in school. But started out down in Minneapolis as a jazz vocalist, and ended up auditioning for a group called The Sounds of Blackness, excuse me, and started performing and singing with them. Sang with them for about 8 years. They are a 3-time Grammy Award-winning group based in Minneapolis. So sang with them, and then I took a position out in Los Angeles working for Prince's keyboardist, a guy named Morris Hayes, as his personal assistant. He's also the band leader of a group called the New Power Generation. So worked out there for 3 years with him. While I was out there, my father passed away. And so I ended up moving back to my hometown to spend time with my family. Excuse me, while I was in Minneapolis, I also received a degree in political campaign management and nonprofit management. So when I moved back home, decided to run for office for mayor, and to honor my father, who worked for the city, for the town as the city building inspector. So I was elected, surprisingly elected mayor, and to a 4-year term, served 2 years of that term, and then moved here to England. My husband is from Panelist, a little village not far from Sheffield. So
you did that with a Yorkshire accent.
Yeah, yeah, right, yeah. So we've been here for 2 years now. I'm currently serving on the board of directors for Leeds College of Music, and producing music, and very much involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, specifically in Leeds, which is where my husband and I are in the process of moving to. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you. And, obviously name check with Prince there. And Sounds of Blackness they're a big deal in, sort of that kind of music scene at the time in the 90s, weren't they? Still around today.
Still around. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary actually this year. There's a motto with the group, once a Sounds of Blackness member, always a Sounds of Blackness member. So whenever they're in the UK or touring, or I can lend my voice to the group, I do. The director of the group, he just did an online masterclass for us at Leeds College of Music last week. So I'm very connected still and involved with the group.
And the first time I met Aaron, I did ask him to sign a CD, which I found in my attic from the 90s. So that's my confession today.
Yeah.
Thanks, Aaron.
You're welcome.
Karen, let's go on to you. So you're a member of our board of governors and an alum.
I am both of those. So good afternoon, everybody. And again, thank you for joining us for this important topic. So yes, as James mentioned, I am very honoured and privileged to be on the board at Sheffield Hallam University. And when I attended there 25 years ago, I never thought for 1 minute that I would end up being on the board. And I did a postgraduate degree in business and finance. And so it was no surprise that I ended up then going into the finance industry. So I'm a partner at PwC as my day job. And I've been there for 23 years. I sit in our risk assurance practice, which I've had a fabulous career. I've got a number of roles, but I'll talk about them in a minute. But I started my sort of career as an apprentice when I left school, not quite sure what I wanted to do, and went back into industry for a little while in banking and finance roles. And then decided I needed to go back to school after a couple of years working to get some more qualifications to get a proper job, as my mother would describe it. And never looked back since, really. And that's when I ended up at Sheffield Hallam, and that's when I ended up at PwC. So it was probably a really good idea for me to do that. In my role at PwC, I lead on the regions for government and health industries. So we've got a huge, successful government and public sector practice, but I'm based in the regions, so I'm very much around supporting some of the work that government do in regions, and that'll be quite interesting post-COVID, because there's a real opportunity, I think, for the regions to step up in terms of responding to that challenge. And I'm also part of our multicultural business network at PwC, so I sit on the leadership team. I lead the team in the north. And diversity inclusion has been a huge passion of mine and something I've heavily promoted within the firm and outside of PwC as well. So this is a great opportunity. So thank you for giving me the chance to speak about that. And then also I have another non-executive role, which is something else I'm passionate about, and that's the Doncaster Children's Services Trust, which is part of the sort of social services part of Doncaster Council. So again, really passionate about education, children, and diversity and inclusion. So they all kind of link together as well. So I'm very lucky to be able to get involved in those kind of roles, as well as doing the day job as well. So thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for fitting us in, Karen. Yvonne, over to you. So you're one of our academy at Hallam, and we've not met before actually until we've had conversations. We've not met in person, but we have met virtually.
That's true. It's funny to me because
Yeah.
when we first met, it was over Twitter. And I have to say that a lot of my opportunities in life so far or lately have been through somehow connected to Twitter. I don't know why or what that says about the platform or about me, but so I guess I'll start off with first, thanks so much for inviting me to be on the panel, and it's such an important topic. And so it's really nice to be able to talk about it and kind of look at how we can influence people who are just graduating, and also people who are currently either in the job market or wondering what might be next. And so I think it's really important to be a part of those conversations. So as far as my path up until now, I guess I would say so I was born in Philadelphia, and I was raised in New Jersey. And then for 20 years, I lived in Maryland, which is where like I had my family. So for me, I'm always kind of grappling with where is home and what does that look like and where do I go back to? But so when I was in Maryland, I decided to go back to school. So I was one of those people who, like, I went to high school and I knew I was destined for like college, which is what we would have called university there. And I was on this academic path. I was going to be a writer. And then I was like, no, I'm going to be a psychologist because I want to eat. And then I was like, no, I'm going to be a writer. And then life happened, and I had graduated early from high school to go to university. And one of the first things I learned was that my full scholarship didn't cover room and board. And so at that time, no one else in my family had navigated the university system and knew about like the financial aid aspects or even how to ask for more money. And so we didn't find out until I was there, and they were like, okay, so about the rest of the money. And so my first attempt at university was kind of cut short. And then I moved to Atlantic City. My grandmother, who's always like my role model, she had 4 houses because she had 4 kids. And to her, it was like she was creating a legacy. And so like, I feel like that's the role that I want to live up to. But anyway, so I was in New Jersey and I was working and I was clubbing like it was a job. And the one thing that I was further and further from my goal of going back to school, because at some point it just seemed impossible and impractical. And then I moved to Maryland, and I had a family. And again, it just seemed like, wow, I'd really like to go to school, but how am I going to do it? And one day I went to this bed and breakfast class because I thought, well, my grandmother had guest houses. And so like, maybe that's kind of like in our family DNA, and maybe I'll start this, like have a guest house. And I went to this class, and it was run through the community college. So that meant it was really affordable, and it was in the evening. So it was accessible. It worked around my time. And it was wonderful. And while I was there, like I worried about all those things that I felt like as a mom, I was meant to worry about, like, you know, are my kids going to be okay? And like, does I was married at the time, and does he recognize that, like, you know, they need to eat and they need to do homework and all these different things? And I came back from the class, and like, I came back and the same amount of kids were there as I left with. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they can like manage without me being around. So I went back to school, and I felt like I just never stopped. So I went back to school there. And the one thing I quite appreciated, and I didn't recognize it then until I came to the UK, where here they call people like a mature learner or mature student. And I didn't have that label then. And I don't know what that would have done if I had, because there it was just like I was a student. I was just there like doing school. And the only thing I wasn't doing it in the way that I recommend people do it now. So I was doing it, and I was working, momming, going to school. I could never tell you who was in my classrooms or like who was in the classes. If we weren't working on a project, we probably didn't talk to each other because I just didn't know them and I didn't have time to know them. There were all these resources and all these programs that came with tuition. I didn't know anything about them. If they weren't in my class, I didn't do them. And then I when I finished my undergrad in communications and in English, I knew, like, I don't know, like, you know, when you get that, like, I always wanted to be in university. I always wanted to go to school. So why would I stop then? So I went to Johns Hopkins for my master's, and I was there and I was studying and I was working and momming. And then I had this opportunity to take a 9-day class in Florence. And it was this intensive writing class where you had to pick up a new subject. So I picked up creative nonfiction to go with fiction. And while I was there, I recognized that, like, wow, I needed that community, that community of writers, and just being around people who understood what a rejection meant and what submitting something meant, or what it meant to want to be published in the New Yorker. And so, like, all these different things that I started caring about the people who were in my classroom and using all these services, and, like, that I was, you know, paying for whether I used them or not. But then I realized, like, how much I needed community. And then I taught in the US, and I was like one of the adjunctpreneurs. So I was like teaching part-time at like multiple universities and community colleges. And I had the pleasure of teaching some places where I had gone to school. And for me, that was like, you know, a wonderful thing. And then I still wanted more because I wanted Dr. Yvonne Battle Felton, because my goodness, like, it sounds good, it feels good, it looks good. It's like, it's everything. So, but I knew I wanted it in writing, and I knew I wanted it in creative writing. It had to be a degree that I wanted because I was moving my family somewhere around the world to come with me. And then someone told me about the program at Lancaster. So I did my PhD at Lancaster, and my kids were great because they were like, yeah, let's do it. Let's move to the UK. So I did that. And while I was there, like, I feel like on my tombstone, I don't know what else it's going to say, but it's going to say I did my PhD, because I did like every program. I was doing things with the enterprise team. I was doing things at theater, local theater. I'm not even an actor, but I was like, everything I could kind of get involved in, I did it. And I feel like I got the most out of my, like, how much you pay for your tuition. I was on a bursary. I didn't have to pay for it, but I got the most out of other people's money. It was a fabulous experience. And so from there, like, I'll stop soon, but my PhD was in writing. So I wrote a novel. Because that's what you do. And luckily, I won a Northern Writers Award in 2017 for fiction. And then my novel was published in 2019, and it was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction, shortlisted for the Jalek Prize, published in the US February 2020. And I feel like there's so much more to come and so much more I want to do. But all of that started for me with community, stories, and family.
I love what you say there about momming, if I've heard you right.
You have. I'm trying to make it like, it's just, I mean, it's what you do. And so, like, but people don't necessarily call it that. So I'm trying to start that. I'm starting that. I'm owning the word, and then I'm just slipping it into conversations every chance I get.
It's important to own it.
Exactly.
Thanks, Yvonne. Samuel, on to you. Samuel's probably one of the most dapper alumni that I've ever met at Hallam. So we've done some work in the past, and you've sort of talked to students around setting up your own business, and you've done some work with the student union in the past. But tell us your story, Samuel.
Yeah, so thank you. It's quite daunting to go last after you've gone after such amazing people. So once again, thank you so much for bringing me onto this discussion. It's important to speak about such topics, especially in this time. So my background, I was born in London, and I'm the oldest of 5 siblings. So I'm an identical twin. And growing up, we grew up in a Reverend Minister's household. So my dad was Reverend Minister of a huge Pentecostal church in England. So growing up in that kind of environment, constantly seeing your dad on stage, constantly seeing him talk to masses of people, constantly seeing him inspire and drive people to want to be better, it was huge pressure on Andrew and my shoulders as we were the oldest. So we've always strived to want to do more, especially within our community, to always want to push, always want to strive, always want to have the kind of impact we saw our father having within a Black community. So he was then caused to move around the country, which is where I was speaking earlier about growing up in Manchester. So we lived in Manchester, North and South London, in Ireland for 4 years at one point. So we've moved around quite a lot, and we've got good networks of different groups of individuals, which I think growing up was good because it caused me to see the world very differently. It caused me to interact with individuals I wouldn't have usually interacted with and understand different cultures and different people, different backgrounds in different unique and diverse ways. So eventually moved to Bury, Greater Manchester, where I always say Greater Manchester, not many people know where Bury is. So that's where I grew up. And that's where I went to the whole of high school and the whole of college. Now, going through that period was probably one of the most difficult periods in my life, because that's where I started to realize or started to understand more about race and more about, that's when I found out I was a black man. I didn't know before that. I just thought I was another human being just navigating through life. And it's when I moved to a predominantly white area, that's when I realized that race was key and that race mattered to people. And that's where we encountered so many different scenarios, racial bullying, discrimination. One incident where we had to be kept in the head teacher's office after school was a group of individuals who were trying to beat us up after school, had to get the police to escort us home. And a lot of things that happened during that period of time in my life that made me realize that there's a level of ignorance surrounding race that doesn't need to exist. So that taught me a lot in that period of time. So I didn't particularly want to go to university at all. Andrew or myself didn't. But the reason we did is because our mum and dad drummed into us that look at all the things that have happened to you growing up. Look at all the things that you've encountered. Already, as a black person, you have to, I'm sure many of you would have heard this phrase, you've got to work 10 times harder than a counterpart, and so on and so forth. So if you've been through all this already in your life and you haven't got a degree, imagine how much you'll go through without a degree as an adult. I was like, okay, fair enough. So I went to go and do a degree at Sheffield Hallam University, which was probably one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. I loved Sheffield Hallam because of the community and the union. I didn't so much enjoy my courses, which I'll talk about later on. But during the time at Sheffield Hallam, it caused me to really expand my thinking and to grow as an individual. I became, in our first year, I became the president of the ACS, African Caribbean Society. And my second year, I became Sheffield Hallam's first international Black Students Executive. So really champion change amongst the Black students, which I found always really interesting, how they grouped international students with the Black students, which always made me feel as though the Black students were seen as international students. But anyway, but it was important that we helped champion change and really caused us to be seen as equals, which is what was so key. So once I graduated, I moved back to Ireland with my parents at the time. Then I moved to London. Now, when I came to London, one of the things that were on my heart was to be an entrepreneur. I really wanted to set something up, like Yvonne was talking about, legacy, ensure that my family, that if my parents have done so much in the UK, I've got so much properties in the UK, I've established so much, we need to do more. So moved back to London, and I started to realize that as multicultural as London is, the same barriers were in London as much as they were up north. So I struggled initially, struggled to find a job, struggled to set up a business. And the turning point in my life was when I met a young woman on the London Underground who ended up becoming my wife. And she pushed me so much in every aspect of my life to be a better man, to be a better person, called me to think differently, and to never give up, which I thought was so key. There's so many encounters or situations I encountered in work, in my career, after university, where it was really easy for me to want to give up. But she was like, no, we're not giving up. We're going to accomplish and we're going to do great things. Again, like Yvonne was saying, wants to pursue her a PhD. She's now doing that. She's a lecturer. She's pushing. I'm pushing. We're both pushing. We're going to ensure that we accomplish greatness together. So that was a turning point in my life. Was it made me realize I can't give up. I can't stop. We've got to push together, especially as two young Black people in London. We need to rise. So that was a great moment of my life. But I remember one night she was sat in her room and she was watching a TV show. And at the time I was looking for investment for my business. And she was watching, she was like, oh, Sammy, I really think you should watch this show. And I was like, nah, I'm not really a TV person in general. And every week I'd hear her watching a show where I hear people arguing and shouting in the background. I'm like, what are you watching? She's like, Sammy, I really think you should watch this show. Me being a very, very happy life, happy wife, listen to my missus, all that kind of stuff. I'm a good guy. So I sat down in bed. I watched it with her, and she was watching a show called The Apprentice. And I also, we've got some Americans here, so I want to throw a disclaimer out there. There's no link to Donald Trump. It's a different, the UK version with Lord Alan Sugar. So I did that, watched it with her, and she's like, I think you should apply for the show. And I was like, I don't really want to apply for the show. I don't really want to be perceived as a clown or comedian or hamper my career even more than it is being now, because obviously the perception that can be seen from appearing on such a TV show. And she said, no, I think you should do it because it'll help raise a public profile and it'll help you secure an investment once you finish the show. So my missus being missus started filling out the application form for me. I said to me, if you want me to submit it, I will. I said, go on, submit it. Long story cut short, over 50,000 applicants ended up being shortlisted and got onto the show. We reached 7 of it. And after that show, that's when I saw my life was completely changed. Doors opened, a lot more people more receptive to what I had to say because I had a platform now. And people wanted to now saw my knowledge and my experiences as credible because of what I've been through on how the platform I've been given. So that was a turning point in my life. And that really helped me to see things from a different perspective. But it also helped show me that there are loads and loads of individuals in the UK who just didn't have the opportunities that I had, which is where I then set up a business called Build a Master, where I helped individuals get started in business. So I want to tell you more about finance, law, business strategy, marketing, and the fundamentals required to really help build a business from the ground up, which then required me to reach out to other industry experts in those fields to then teach seminars, masterclasses, courses, all accredited to ensure that these were being set up properly. And then through that, I collaborated with many universities, predominantly University of Liverpool in London and Coventry University in London. And coincidentally, from a person who hated his experience at university, in 2018, I was then asked to give a graduation talk at Coventry University in London, which I saw as a complete turnaround. And I remember walking onto that stage and giving the graduation talk. I'm thinking, if someone had told me in 2013, when I was in my graduation talk, I can't remember what the gentleman said in that graduation, I just wanted to get my certificate and get out of the room. I'm thinking, if someone had told me, Samuel, back then, I would be giving a graduation talk, I'd have never believed it. But that transformation over that 4-year period was evidence to me that even someone like myself, who was always written off and never given any opportunities for no reason, can accomplish and get to that point. And if I can do it, anyone can. Yeah, currently I'm working with The Guardian and I write articles on Black Lives Matter to really highlight topics just from my experience and with the platform I've got just to speak on topics such as this, which is why I think discussions like this are so important. So that's it.
Thank you, Samuel. But I'm clearly giving a talk to the wrong university there.
I know, eventually don't worry.
We'll talk about that after. So I just want to pick up that point that you were saying, which is really interesting, which links to the next question, which is around kind of the Black Lives Matter movement, and that automatically, because of the colour of your skin, you've got to do more to get ahead. That there is a lot against you because of your kind of racial background and your racial makeup. Could I just throw that out to the panel and sort of reflect a little bit on your experiences of that? Because I think that's something that is, the facts are very stark, aren't they? When you look at particularly student populations, graduate outcomes, there's a big challenge for us as a sector to do more there.
Yeah, so I've taken my mic off, so I'll go first if that's all right, James. If I don't know if so I get, back to Samuel's point, I remember growing up and being told so many times that I'd never make it, that I shouldn't have aspirations. If I'd again thought back, I'd ever be a partner at PwC when I was, leaving school, it just wasn't something that that was open to me, or something that that I could have accessed, and that was more because of the lack of confidence of other people in me, because I didn't have the right or assumed I didn't have the right background. I didn't look right, and because of the colour of my skin. And I can remember going to a recruitment agency and talking about wanting to go into the Big Four, or well, there were big six firms then, and was told that I didn't come from the right background. Now you can interpret that a number of ways, whether that was academia or whether that was just because of my education and how I looked. But that made me feel I had really felt I had to work twice as hard, or if not even more than twice as hard, to get in and to prove that individual wrong. And so those challenges came throughout most of my childhood, through most of my life, where you were always, the bar was set for you at a level that normally for other people who are not of colour, there isn't that bar that's been set for them, and those perceptions of you, even when you walk in a room, that people have the stereotypes and preconceived views about you. So I think, for me, the whole Black Lives Matters movement is a watershed moment, and I think it's a moment that needs to absolutely change and rewrite history. because it's just been too long, and it's been left too long. And race shouldn't be a taboo subject. It should be something that people can talk about. And if you're uncomfortable talking about it, and I suggest that you need to challenge yourself as to why you're uncomfortable talking about it. And if you're a black person and you have to talk about your race, and Samuel actually, my childhood was very similar. I travelled a lot when I was younger, and I think that did help me understand and embrace and appreciate and respect other people's cultures much more than I probably would have done if I'd have just lived in. I was born in Doncaster, but I was very fortunate that my mother travelled a lot and she took her children with her. But so I always had respect for other people's cultures, and I have a very diverse family now, and I have a very diverse group of friends. But I do see a lot of people who just don't have that level of experience, and so that it frightens them when they're faced with something they don't know, a culture that they don't understand, or a colour of the skin that they don't like to see. So for me, the opportunity to talk about it, to explore the issues, for people to feel uncomfortable being uncomfortable is a good start, and we need to make sure that we keep this conversation going for a long time until we see proper change.
And I think it's interesting, Karen. So you're in a senior role in a kind of global business, and does that make it easier for you to influence change and open up doors and break down barriers, or do you still think that there's conversations and awkward conversations that need to be had in organisations like that?
So yeah, I think I'm quite lucky. If I'm honest, we had we as a firm, and actually it got picked up in the US actually before it got picked up in the UK, the US firm about the Black Lives Matters, and one of our senior partners tweeted about it I think pretty much the day after it happened. So it was straight on our radar, and our chairman stood up and made a very bold, brave statement about it, and basically offered a platform to talk about it. Up until that point, would I honestly say I would feel comfortable? I've always been able to sort of challenge people and take on barriers, but I think the nature of the conversation has changed. So you're not about D&I, tick a box. Have you got a strategy? What are you doing? It's now very specific around the impact it has on you as a black person growing up in this country in particular, and the barriers that are put in front of you that people never necessarily would want to acknowledge. So although it's always been able to talk about it, and I do see myself, I've got an opportunity to be in a position of influence where I can have those conversations and I can influence change within my own organisation, and I'm a very privileged place to do that. But I still have conversations with people who are more junior, who still suffer racism, who still feel those glass ceilings are put in front of them, who are still unable to speak out, and that makes me sad. And it's a bit like the legacy point that Yvonne made and Samuel made. That is my legacy. I have to change. This, for me, it's a gift that I'm in a position of influence, and I need to use it for the force of good, and I will.
No, great. And it's really, really important to have role models and people that break through those barriers, because that's a huge challenge in organisations that may not have that kind of representation at the kind of senior levels. Erin, I was going to ask you a question about you being from Minneapolis and that kind of impact that's had on you. And you're obviously very active in Black Lives Matter as a movement, and you've done a lot of work in Leeds. Can you just talk us through that and kind of your perspectives on it?
Sure. I mean, when initially, when it happened, it was my husband that told me what happened. We were at our home, and he was online on social media, and the video came up, and just the look on his face, I'll never forget. Just the look of horror and disgust and fear, and everything that I saw in his eyes kind of told me everything that I needed to know. I started to watch the video, but I couldn't finish it, to be honest with you, and I still haven't seen the entire thing because it was just too painful. It was way too painful. When he when he yelled out for his mother, that just broke me down. And you know, we've been here so many times before in the States, so many times before. But this particular time, it really hit home because Minneapolis is home, you know. And when I was singing with the Sounds of Blackness, we rehearsed our rehearsal space, which they still rehearse at to this day, is 2 blocks from where George was killed. So I was in that neighborhood every week. I frequented the store that he went into before he was killed on a weekly basis. So although I didn't know George personally, it definitely sent a shockwave, through Minneapolis, through my friends, through the community there. Because of my my background in political campaign management, it just so happens that the Attorney General, who is investigating the case and currently involved with the case, I worked on his campaign when he was running for Congress. He was the first Black Muslim elected to Congress in the United States. Keith Ellison is his name. And now he's the Attorney General for the state of Minnesota. And so he's overseeing the investigation. So I'm tied in that way to the situation. Whenever I turn on the news and they show footage from Minneapolis, I recognize someone or know someone, or so for a week, literally every day I cried for a week straight. It was just so I can't even put into words what I felt, to be honest with you. And it had a major impact on me. And so I didn't, being here in England, I didn't know, what I could do. Just being an activist, I felt like I had to do something. So I started looking at if there was any, Black Lives Matters organizations or groups here in the UK. I found one in Leeds, and reached out to the founder there, Marvina Newton, and called her up, introduced myself, and we had a conversation. She told me that there was a protest happening. So after she knew my connection to Minneapolis, she invited me to speak at the protest, which I gladly accepted, and have been involved with the organization, ever since this has happened. We speak almost every day. She just calls me for advice, just mentorship. I've gone up to Leeds every week to meet with them and the team, because that's just the least that I could do. So it's definitely something that hit very close to home, and something that I'm still processing, to be quite honest with you. But like I said, we've been here so many times in the States, but this particular time, I think because of the timing with the global pandemic of COVID-19, you had a captive audience. Everyone was at home. Everyone was glued to their television or social media, because that's all we could do at that particular time. So the impact of that, and folks galvanizing globally, and the combination of the pandemic, those two things together, I think have made this the movement that it is, ironically.
And it's interesting that if you look at the history of that movement, it started off as a response, a very powerful response that was a meme on Facebook around a shooting that happened in Florida. And it's just built and it's grown over this time. The pandemic, like you say, was a catalyst for something that needed to happen anyway. And Yvonne, I was going to say to you, how do you feel this is this a watershed moment for you, and how do you feel about it?
I have to say, like, I need it to be a moment, a movement. I need it to be a movement in time that sparks meaningful change. I think we all need meaningful change. And I know, so like one of the reasons that we came to the UK, so I was going to do the PhD, right? And then my family was like, I have 3 children, and my oldest, I wasn't sure it was the right time because she was finishing high school in the US, and I didn't want to disrupt her future, because one thing I've always told my kids is that you can do anything and there are no barriers. I was fortunate when I went to high school that I was in college-bound programs. And so it was always like, you know, you're going to go to university and you're going to do, you know, great things. And it was kind of like, I hadn't thought of it, what happens to the kids who aren't in that program, until like my best friend wasn't in that program. And then you start looking at the conversations they have are just completely different. But so I always knew my kids, like there were no barriers that I put no barriers on what they could do. And then when I applied for Lancaster, truth be told, I thought it was an online program. And so I applied and I was like, hey guys, wouldn't it be funny if it was gonna be like, you know, we moved to England? And I really thought I was like telling this joke. And then when I got my acceptance, they were like, you know, you were accepted to study in England, in Lancaster. And I was like, that's a funny way to spell online. So I contacted them because I really didn't think that's what they meant. And they were saying, well, you know, I was writing about slavery in the US because I wanted to know how families reconnected after the emancipation. I don't read a lot about that. And I wanted to be, I'm a mom. And so for me, like the horror is not knowing where my kids are at night, or not being able to keep them safe. Or, and so it's just a lot around it. But so I wanted to write these stories and do this research. And so they were like, well, we thought, of course you'd want to write this in Lancaster. And I was thinking, wow, like I'm writing about, you know, slavery in the US and the emancipation. And they were like, of course you want to write it here. So I was like, well, you know what, actually, maybe I do. And my kids were like, yeah, let's do it. And my daughter, who, I mean, she was like number 2/3 and her top of her class, an amazing young woman. She's doing her PhD now in Bath. But anyway, so she's an amazing young woman. And she said, well, let's do it now, because people don't just move to other countries, you know, to pursue like their dreams. And I was like, what? Like people don't, I didn't realize she thought that there were things that like people don't do, or like we couldn't do. So of course, like we had to do it, because like I was talking about, like I'm trying to create a legacy. And I want my kids to know that there's nothing they can't do, but I can't tell them that if I don't show them that. So we came to the UK so that we could do those things. And like, I have 3 children and they are amazing. But when my older son went to school, and they do those things around like, I guess the predictive grades and stuff like that. So where the grades that they predicted seemed like he wasn't gonna learn anything in school. Like it looked to me like he would have been gone backwards. And I'm like, so you're telling me that after all these years of your education system, he will learn nothing? Because for that, then I mean, like, he can learn nothing anywhere else. And then they were saying, no, the numbers don't matter, we don't go with that. But anyway, so there were these odd barriers. But now my son is graduating from UAL this year. And my youngest son is going to do amazing things. And part of that is because of who they are. And also my younger son, I'm homeschooling him. And that was before COVID. It was just like, you know what, actually he wanted to try it. We moved, let's try it. But so all these other people placing barriers in front of my kids, that's just not something I can endure. But while I was doing my PhD and I was writing and I was momming and I was researching and I was doing all these things, in Baltimore, they killed Freddie Gray. And so here I was writing about these parallels. And my novel was going to be set in 1913. And I was looking at like how, it wasn't going to be about policing then. It was about slavery and emancipation and families and all the laws that people put into place so that Black people couldn't find other Black people, so that they can re-enslave Black people after the emancipation. And then when they killed Freddie Gray, I was like, okay, I need to, how do I respond to that creatively? And so I set the novel in 1910, and my character was beaten by police for a crime he may or may not have committed. And it's always interesting to me now, like when I hear people talking about it, like, and especially with the first draft, they were like, did he do it? And I'm like, actually, the point isn't whether he did whatever they think he did. The point is that without evidence, they beat him. They pulled him out of the streetcar and they beat him, and he's in the hospital about to die, which is not the sentence for whatever he may or may not have done. But anyway, so I ended up clarifying that. So for me, like being here was part of showing my kids that you create the future. And the things like, since we've been here, I haven't seen those same, I haven't witnessed those same barriers, but I know that like my daughter, when she was getting married and she wanted to go to the US and she wanted to introduce her fiance to the family. And I didn't realize that she was so afraid to bring him home. Like I knew I didn't want to go. And like my boys were like, we're good right now. But she wanted to go to introduce him to the family. And she was worried that they might get stopped by police and that something might happen and who was going to protect them. And so right now I know I am so angry and so hurt at the US and at people who would conspire to let these situations boil up and keep going, that my children are worried that they can't go back home and feel safe and introduce, like have those same things that people take for granted, introduce him to her dad and have to be worried, not that, you know, oh my gosh, what if my father doesn't like my fiance? Like other people get to worry about that. Or, wow, is this dress gonna fit? Or is this, you know, my hair, is it gonna be too humid? Other people get to worry about that. And so until my kids can worry about those same things that other people's kids get to worry about, like, what? So this legacy that I'm creating is for this world that I want right now. And so I need this to be a movement that leads to meaningful change. And if I become a grandmother, I want my grandkids to be able to play in my backyard. I want them to be able to move around the community and not have to worry about so-and-so with a gun or so-and-so with this racism, which I do believe is some sort of like, it's gotta be it's like a cancer. And it has to be cut out from the core, and it has to be, I don't know, like eradicated in some sort of massive way. And I just need this moment to be more than just something that's forgotten. I don't plan to forget. I plan to keep writing about it and writing about it. And when people ask me like, why are you still writing about slavery? And I'm like, why are we still doing the same things? So when we can stop doing all that, I can stop writing about, you know, oppression and racism. And I can write about it like it's a fantasy or something like, wow, can you believe people ever do this? Until that day, I will be writing and publishing and performing and creating platforms and doing everything I need to do, because we need change right now.
Yeah. And that's a pretty amazing way to put that. Samuel, you mentioned earlier a couple of things about this has got to change, this has got to stop. And I just wondered, from your perspective as someone with a young family who's come through, and you're based in London, what your kind of perspective is on this sort of thing from a, you know, living in a big city in the UK.
Yeah, so I just want to touch on what Erin and Yvonne spoke on, and Karen, but more so the American perspective. So a lot of people have this ideology that because what happened in America, it doesn't affect the UK as much. And in most part, I read an article recently by a brilliant journalist in the UK called F.Y. Hurst, and she spoke about how America was birthed out of racist Britain. And the fact of reality is, as Yvonne was speaking about around slavery, what's frustrated me in the UK is that there's this sense of, why do you guys still talk about slavery? You guys, the wording I've used, you guys speak about slavery. Why is that still a topic? Why are you still bothered about what happened in the past? There's no such thing as racism in the UK. We're the most tolerant country in the UK. We're the most diverse country in the UK. All these narratives that really frustrate me. And they completely disregard our experiences, completely disregard the statistics that heavily show huge disparities in every sector, from healthcare to policing to education to ethnicity pay gap results shown in companies. One of the things that, again, I'll touch on Yvonne's point about slavery. We only finished our payments for slavery in the UK in 2015. So that's generations of Britons that have been implicit in the repayment of slavery in the UK for generations. So it's not something that just happened 100 years ago and it's now done. It's got a more recent history than that, but not one shilling, penny, pound of reparations paid to any Black community. So it's almost like what's happened, ignore it, it's done. We just finished paying the Rothschild family for the bill we took from them, it's done. But nothing's been looked into or solved since then. In the UK, there are, when you look at industries, my past experiences, so growing up again, little things like when I go to work from King's Cross, from Barnet to King's Cross, on a simple, what was seen as a simple train journey, most people, I sit in a first class carriage every way to work. The inspector will come on, will look past, will walk straight to me every single time, where's your ticket? Initially, I used to be like, like, okay, I have not asked anyone else, like, why did you come straight to me? I'm a very jovial, bantery kind of person. Obviously, it doesn't really work when I'm in disagreement with my missus and she thinks I should be more serious all the time, but I'm a very jovial person. So I make a joke out of everything. But initially it was funny. After a while, I just got frustrated. It's like, why do you keep coming to me first? And again, growing up in a Reverend Minister's household in the church, I genuinely didn't see race until I became a growing adult and I realized that I'm a Black man. I got told by the world, I'm a Black man. I'm like, whoa, why does that matter? I'll go to the petrol station and at night time when we're going on long drives to Manchester, and obviously you've got to pay first. Usually pay first at the pump. I remember I went to one petrol station and I went to go pay, but the time I didn't come yet to pay first. And the person at the till said, oh, I've got to pay before I use my petrol. I was like, that's odd. So no, I went to go pay, didn't think anything of it. And then another white gentleman driving a car similar to mine, pulled in, went to go grab the pump, and the guy let him release his petrol straight away. I was like, okay, that's odd. And my missus said, Sam, just leave it. There's no problem. I was like, no. Let's just have a little discussion about what's happened here. I've gone to the till after the white gentleman's gone to the till, and I said to the cashier, when I came to the till, you told me to pay first, but you let this gentleman come straight away. What was all that about? And it was like, oh, he's a regular customer. And then the white guy turned and said to us, but don't lie, I'm not a regular customer. And then the cashier stood there awkward, like, oh. I'm like, listen, like, you've instantly made an assumption that I'm gonna come, the car I'm driving, it's a decent car, I'm not gonna come and steal fuel. Like, why would you make that assumption? And it was just an awkward conversation, but these instances happen every single day for Black people. And what was most powerful about what happened recently is that the Amy Cooper incident happened, and then the George Floyd incident happened. And these incidents tie hand in hand, and this is what people don't realize. Amy Cooper was a senior exec within a top organization in America. George Floyd was a regular gentleman, had these issues, had these past, but a regular American citizen, like everybody else, has got rights, but was killed on the streets. Black people's hopes and dreams are being killed on a day-to-day basis in the corporate world by people who have the mindset and mentality like Amy Cooper on a day-to-day basis. We're not being able to get promotions, we're not able to progress, we're not able to do much in the corporate world. In most instances, being held back. When you speak to most Black people, there's the same issue of pay gap. In the UK, only 3% of large organizations have released their ethnicity pay gap results. Why? If it's not a big issue, release it. But clearly individuals in top organizations know it's a huge issue, don't want it to be resolved. We've looked at gender pay gap, we're resolving it, we're working in it, we're making great strides in the UK. When it comes to ethnicity, it's brushed under the carpet. When recently, one of the things I'm really proud about was being part of a group of individuals who really helped push for The Guardian to be one of the first big organizations to help release its ethnicity pay gap results. And it showed, as you can imagine, huge disparities within an organization where Black people who are doing the same jobs side by side with white people are not getting paid as much, even in an organization such as The Guardian. And then again, when you look at management, most of the management positions were filled by white individuals, despite the fact that The Guardian is such a representative organization for different communities and different groups of people. But if in The Guardian it's like that, imagine other organizations in the UK where we're refusing to look at it whatsoever. So it's a huge problem in the UK, just as is in America, and it's something that needs to be addressed, even when we look at university, which is the last point I'll speak on. The reason I think enjoy my university education is because while studying, I was in a group and of individuals, and I was, again, race didn't mean anything to me growing up. So I went to university with a group of white boys that were in my lectures. So first year, second year, third year placement, fourth year. So I remember we got to the fourth year after a placement year. So first 2 years, again, I was more focused on my union work as opposed to my studying. So I'll do all right, I'll straight by. But third year placement, my placement year taught me a lot about university and life, because once you work in industry during that year, you can't go back to university lazy. You've been waking up early every morning to go to work. You've been smashing it during the corporate world. I did really well on my placement years. I came back to university so driven, so hungry, so passionate. So doing uni work was a breeze compared to having worked in industry. Came to my first and final year at university, I absolutely smashed it. Was getting 90s, 80% in my exams and my papers and everything else. Second half of the year came, I started getting 40% and 50%, doing the same quality work, and I was like, that makes no sense. And the white boys that I went to, that I was in the same group as, doing group work with, doing the same things were getting higher grades than me. So initially I let it slide. I was like, okay, maybe I'm missing out. So maybe they're getting in their groups together, doing a bit more work that I'm completely unaware of, and they're doing a bit better. I'm lacking behind. And then I was asked to read over their work, and I was realizing that my work was of a much higher standard than theirs. And I was like, this isn't making sense. So I approached one of the lecturers after one of them capped me on when I worked for 70%. And she said to me, I don't think you have the ability to produce the work you produced. When she said it to me, I just thought, okay, maybe my first 2 years, I maybe clowned about a bit. Maybe I was a bit of a class clown. You didn't think I had the ability to do it in my fourth year. All right, let me leave it slide. But I realized the white boys were getting high grades. I thought, okay, let it slide. Got to the end of the year, and I missed out on the first class by less than 1%. I begged my lecturers, please, like, the work I've done during the course of this year, you can see it's of an excellent standard. Just give me a first class. And they all said no. None of them would push my grades up a bit just to ensure that I got a first class. And I spoke to one of the course leaders, or the part people, and he said to me, based off the work we've seen you do in this final year, despite the fact that you've worked really hard, we don't feel that you deserve a first class. But the white boys did. They got first classes. And at that time, when that happened to me, I'm not gonna lie, I was so angry for ages with Sheffield Hallam University. If you'd told me I was going to do talks like this at university again, if not for the fact James is I like James. James is a good man. He's a good man. I just didn't think I'd ever be involved in university again, so it really hurt what happened at the time. But when you speak of other Black people around the country, in the UK, you see that's a common factor. We've got a small percentage of Black professors in the UK, a small percentage of Black lecturers in the UK, a small percentage of Black, not in accordance with the statistics in regards to Black people in the actual general demographic of the UK as well. But most importantly, one of my friends, again, another Black doctor in the UK, carried out a research across universities in the country and found out that Black people that come from the same socio-economic background as white people at universities, on average, tend to perform and get a 15% less, on average, negative disparity compared to the white peers they go to at university. So clearly there's a problem with universities in the UK, and there's a mindset and there's structural imbalances that mean that even though Black people are performing as well, if not better, they're doing worse. And this is in educational institutes in the country, how much more in workplaces and society. So yeah.
Thanks, Samuel. And we've talked about this story a little bit in the past. I think it's really interesting that we got about 16 to 18% of our students are from BAME backgrounds, and we want them to perform better. When you look at graduate outcomes, that they're quite low for those groups. So what do we do? And you know what, this is the stage that the university's at. A lot of universities are at, is that they need to start unpacking that conversation, having that with themselves and looking at the systems they've got. I think it's a really big challenge for the sector, but it's something that we can do more. And Yvonne, you might want to come in on this.
I was thinking so. I think those conversations are definitely important to be had. And I think there's also that realization that part of what's standing in the way for maybe Black and Asian and minority ethnic students is the university itself. And so it's that structure needs to change. Like if my children perform at a level that is equal or better than their peers, they should know that, like, my kids have a champion and an advocate in me. And so I will be the one, my daughter's a grown woman, and I still have no problem calling up and being like, look, we need to look at these numbers. And because one, my kids are international students here, so I'm paying more for them to be here. And so I'm not paying more for them to get less when I know that they're working as hard or harder. And so I think the universities definitely need to look at, okay, so it's not necessarily that Black people are underperforming. It's that if there is racism in the marking or and we can call it unconscious bias or we can call it conscious bias, but whatever you call it, if the outcome is that someone is working harder and getting less marks, then we need to do some serious, not just conversations, but actions. I think that's what I feel like since I've been in the UK, I've seen research on just about everything. And I think there is certainly a place for research. And I think it's important to have some of these numbers and some of this data. What I haven't necessarily seen as much of is acting on the research. Like I see people talking about the research and people re-talking about the research and then re-researching the research. And then I feel like there's that culture of research, but I don't see a culture of action. And that's the one thing that you're thinking, my goodness, so I think one thing I would like to ask, and so I know that people are going to get a chance to ask us some questions next week. One thing I would like to ask the people who are going to watch that is, what can I do? So I'm a lecturer of creative writing and creative industries at Sheffield Hallam University. What can I do to make your experience better? What do you need from me to either be a role model, to come and to talk to events, to host you on my platforms? What is it that you need from me? So that's what, if I'm going to tune in and be a part of that discussion, I want it with the idea of, so there are things that I guess can do. There's things that I can learn to do. There's things I might be able to help other people do. There's things they can help me to help them do, all those different things. So if you're going to ask, I think, a question of me on that day, anyone who's considering asking a question of me, I'd like it to start with what I can do, and then ask me your question, because I want to help. I want to be an advocate, and I want to help people to dismantle these barriers, because it's time for them to come down.
Yeah. Aaron.
I just want to piggyback on what Yvonne is saying. And I think one of the conversations that needs to be had in institutions is even the usage of the BAM label. I know that there's some discrepancy and differences, even within our own community and the Black community, but people of color are not the minority. We're the majority in the world. So that particular term already, in my opinion, it puts us, less than when you're using it, and that's a conversation that even that terminology is one that I think needs to be talked about and looked at, because we're not the minority in the world. We're the majority, people of color. So I just wanted to put that in there.
That's a very good point. And there's a big thing here about language, isn't there? And are people comfortable with it? And there's a lot of conversations I've had within the university and with colleagues at other institutions about having open conversations and asking slightly awkward questions and being able to have that. And I feel that certainly universities are in a space where they're starting to do that. So how do white colleagues support Black colleagues? And that needs to happen. And I don't know if you've got any advice about how people navigate those conversations. Karen, you might have come across this at PwC.
Sorry, just get myself off mute. So one of the most interesting conversations I've ever had with one of my counterparts at PwC was when we were doing some work around diversity and inclusion, and we set in some particular targets, and I will call them targets because we wanted to really shift the dial and look at the data and understand what was happening So we have a real good success record and a track record at recruiting people, and we recruit people from lots of different backgrounds, socially and ethnicity, and we're very successful. What we have a real issue with is progression. And so, you know, I wanted to look at the data and understand, but unlike others, Yvonne, I was keen to make action rather than just look at, we have lots of data, you're absolutely spot on about that, and very little action. So, so one of the things we did, we wanted to look at, you know, what was happening, understand what was happening, and I wanted the sort of senior leadership to take some responsibility and accountability in terms of what was happening with the data and why people weren't progressing. So one of the partners, and to be fair, you know, he was very honest. He came to me and said, Karen, I really struggle with this, you know, the fact that I feel I'm white privileged, and he used those terms, you know, why is that a problem? Why? Well, it's not a problem for you. But you know, you need to understand what white privilege means. And you know, he says, well, it's not my fault that, you know, I came from such and such a background. I had, you know, all these fantastic opportunities. And I said, no, it's not. And actually it's great. And I said, but wouldn't it be fantastic if everybody had the same? And I said, so it's not about you, it's about creating a level playing field. And it's not about the white privilege getting the advantage, it's about everybody having the same advantage. And I said, and that is unfortunately something that you're going to have to accept, that you know, those things that were available to you, and those sections that are given to other people who are of colour, and those barriers that are put in front of you, you never had to experience that. You've never walked in a room and someone look at you, and this has happened to me because, you know, you listen to my voice, my name, there's nothing, you know, black about that at all. And I've walked into a room and I could see the face, I'm like, oh my God, she's black, you know, and it's been a bit of a shock. Now, you know, I kind of find it quite funny, and I'm like, I do find it quite amusing, and I take it as a compliment, actually. But, you know, there's those kind of little things that, if you aren't resilient in yourself, can eat away confidence and undermine you as a person. And it's so, and those people, white privilege, I guess, have never had to deal with that. They've never had to sort of fight your way through social systems. You've never had to, you know, you always kind of were born knowing that you are going to be able to have those opportunities presented to you on a plate. So those are the kind of conversations that I have, and it's not necessarily to make them feel any lesser, because I think it's great. I think everybody should be privileged. It'd be fantastic, but not everybody has that same opportunity, and it's just making them understand and appreciate that they have, whether they like it or not, have had an advantage in life that has opened the doors to them that are closed to many.
And I'd welcome views from other panel members on allyship and white allyship and why that is important.
You know, one of the things that I was going to say after Karen's great point, all of your great points, actually, it's been awesome. But you know, this is not blacks against whites. It's blacks against racism. And there's a difference, and people often confuse the two things and put the two things together. It's not black versus white, it's blacks versus racism, no matter what color that racism comes at. So you know, that's an important point, and conversation, you know, again, that I think needs to be had, and needs to be that distinction, you know, needs to be made. We definitely need white allies. We always have. You know, we've always needed white allies, and we will continue to need white allies. And I welcome that. I'm married to a white man, so you know, that support is needed and appreciated, but at the same time, those allies need to do a lot of listening. You know, the white people have had the microphone for a long time now, you know, and it's time for other voices to have the mic, so to speak. and it's our time now to have the microphone, and for white allies to be able to listen, as Karen said, and so that everything is equitable. That's the type of world that we are trying to create. But it's not the time for the allies to be running the show, so to speak. It's the time to be listening, and to hear what we're saying and use your privilege to elevate us and the platform, and to give us the platform to be able to share, like we're doing today.
Thank you. We had a question that came in about how can graduates of colour become inspiring leaders in their own right? I mean, is there a role there for allyship? Is there a role there for mentorship? Because that's the other element. And Samuel, you know all about mentorship, so I'm going to bring you in at this juncture.
When you say mentorship from individuals in industry, do you mean mentoring?
Yeah, or kind of within a kind of professional capacity.
Yeah, that's a good question. One thing I've realized about the UK is that there are loads of Black people in the UK who are doing phenomenal things that people are completely unaware of. Like Erin was saying, they haven't been given platforms. The perfect example is Karen. And when I look at Karen as a woman, no, let's be real. When I look at Karen, a Black British woman, but then what she's gone to accomplish, but with such grace, and these are the kind of individuals that need to be out there and be shown to everyone, to be shown as this is an example of Black excellence, and we need to see more of this. And it's frustrating because we're not shown these images of Black people. We're not, and we're shown images of minority of Black people that don't represent the majority of Black people in the UK, which is a fact. And before I touch on your topic of mentorship, I just want to touch on the fact that, again, like Karen was mentioning earlier on, I remember at work, I was leading the diversity talks across the 4th floor, our advertising floor. And I went to one of the client partners after the meeting, and she said to me, oh, how was Use Lot's meeting? So initially, I was like, all right. I just went in one ear, went out the other. And then the information kind of U-turn, it came back into my ear. And I was like, yo, what does she mean by Use Lot's meeting? And as we've come to realize, there's a clear divide between white and Blacks in most instances. A lot of white people see themselves as separate to the issue, can see the situation, but either don't acknowledge that there's a problem or don't want to acknowledge the problem. And things won't change until white people in the UK acknowledge there's a problem, which is not happening. They want to either say it's a class issue, which it's not, it's a race issue. They want to dismiss and say, oh, we're the most tolerant country, that there's no problem, as if Black people around the world are protesting for no reason, as if we've all gone mad and we're all just shouting for no reason. It's not possible. That's not the case. And even when it comes to educating our educational system, white scientists in the UK found skeletons in a cave in the UK from 10,000 years ago that showed that the first Britons in the UK were Black. So whiteness in Britain, in Europe, isn't as old as people once thought it was. It's only 10,000 years old. So in actual fact, same white people that claim to be separate to Black people were actually once Black when you got 10,000 years ago. And it's a case where it's like, such education isn't taught in our educational systems, and it's not taught, our education has been whitewashed. So it's a case where we're not taught about Black history. The only things we know about Black history is slavery. The only things we know about Black history are great inspirational leaders that have done great things, but no more than that. And Black history is more elaborate and was longer than just slavery. So education in the UK needs to change. But back to the mentorship point, it's all about highlights. Number one, there are so many Black leaders in the UK. We've got Yvonne, Aaron, Karen, who's just like my northern woman, like just pioneering change up north. And these are the individuals that people can reach out to and really gain mentorship from, because she's navigating into fields and areas that young Black people just haven't been able to reach out to, and haven't been able to see people doing such things. What we see in the UK are musicians, footballers, but Black people are doing more than just entertainment. We're more than just sports, yes, we're fast, we're strong, we're intelligent, but we can do more than sing, rap, and run and kick a ball. We can do a lot more than that, and it's not being shown in the UK. So I'd say do your research, look for individuals you can get mentored by, because that's what I did. I reached out to individuals, not just black people, but white people as well. It's not a race thing. If you want to learn, reach out to individuals you see that are inspiring you, that can open doors for you. Reach out to them and ensure that they're able to educate you on things that you aren't aware of to open doors for you. And my last point on that point is that you find with a lot of black people, the reason a lot of black people aren't able to go as far, obviously, if you look at America, first and foremost, there were laws that were put in place years ago that only ensured that white people were able to buy properties in certain areas and black people weren't. And obviously that generational wealth has been held in the white communities now, where black people are now having to get in the property ladder. So we weren't able to inherit as much generational wealth as black people in America. Same as the UK, where we were held back, not by law, but by not being able to rent certain places, being in certain places. So we've been held back in a lot of instances in the UK where we've not been able to be at the level of white people in this country. Same with knowledge. A lot of white families naturally know a lot of things in regards to progression, in regards to education, in regards to employment, and they will actually put their kids in certain places, which is I've seen growing up in North, that black families are completely unaware of. If you've grown up in households, if obviously you've got books like Rich Dad Poor Dad, which speak on things like that, and if you've grown up in an environment or in families where you've not had the knowledge available, to reach out to people who you know have now, or individuals who you may think have, to gain that information, that knowledge that will get you to that level, to be able to push and to go further than you've been able to based on knowledge you've had in your lifetime. So reach out to people and just keep pushing.
Thanks, Samuel. I'm just noting time because it's a really fascinating discussion. Probably we've answered some of the questions that came through. There'll obviously be some questions that come up in live chat. But one of the things I was going to ask you all is just to reflect kind of final kind of word of wisdom to our graduating students this year, particularly class of 2020 of colour, and any advice that you have at the kind of, as they stand at the precipice in this very strange time, and how they navigate race in their kind of future careers. Any kind of top tips from you?
I feel like it's a game show where, like,
sorry,
I was trying to see if other people were gonna set the mute or unmute, and I'm like, so since I won with the mute thing, I'll just say, I guess my top tips. I don't know if it's navigating race or it's just navigating career and navigating life. So first, I would say congratulations on taking your steps to pursue education, and then from there, congratulations on the next step and the next step. And for me, I would say it is embracing that idea that you are the creator of your legacy. And for me, that means that there will be opportunities that maybe you go for that you don't get, but there will be opportunities for you to create things. One thing that I've quite enjoyed about this experience for me so far is that when I see something I went to experience and it's not there, I have been able to contact people to find out how to do it. I've been willing to contact people to find out how to do it. They've been so generous with their time and their experiences and their expertise. And so the things that I've wanted to create, I've either created or co-created. And I would say, like, go about that as if you are the only creator, the only writer of your story. And those things that you're thinking, oh, I really wish there was this, do it. When you're thinking, I really wish I knew how to do this, learn it. So it's about, skilling up, creating those networks that you need and those communities that you want to be a part of. Find a way in, and if there's no way in, you create a community so that you can be proud of what you do and be a part of that.
Okay, I'll go next. I'm second in the game show. So yeah, my three sort of tips of advice. The first one is about being resilient. I think COVID, race, all these really difficult subjects that are, hitting the younger generation quite hard. I'll not get into my economic sort of pedestal about what I think, the UK itself is going to, and globally is going to be challenged on post-COVID. So I think definitely resilience in the new world. is important, and the ability to be resilient even in the face of adversity. The second for me is really about staying current and staying knowledgeable. The world has, I've seen organisations kind of accelerate 5 years in the last 5 months, where things they thought were impossible they've done and they've had to get on and do. So I think keeping aware of the pace of change is really important. And then the third one, which Yvonne touched on, I've called it entrepreneurship, but you've called it creativity. I do think those people that will succeed in the future are those people who have the ability to create, recreate themselves, be entrepreneurial, new ideas, be disruptors, being able to take things to markets and quickly, and to be able to build off that. So I do think that entrepreneurial mindset will be really important going forward into the future as well, because we've seen businesses that have been sort of turned on its head and ripped apart old models and structures, and we need people who can create the economies of the future. That's my top tips.
I'll jump in next so Aaron can bless us with wisdom last. Yes. So thank you, Karen, Yvonne, for your top tips. I think mine would just be what a great time to be Black, Asian, minority, ethnic. Honestly, I think this is probably the greatest time in our modern history to be a Black person, because now the spotlight is firmly on us, and I think this is now a time just to be bold, to go out there and just do things. My parents, when they came to the UK, weren't able to do certain things. They had the intelligence, they had the knowledge, they had the ability to do it, but they didn't have the doors that were open for them to do it. We now do. So now as graduates, you're out in a world where there's jobs that were created, jobs weren't around that are now. When I first graduated, jobs are constantly changing, new doors are constantly opening, new things, things are constantly being created as the world is constantly evolving. So this is now time to be as creative as possible, as entrepreneurial as possible, and just do things that you have in your heart to do. Don't stop, keep pushing. That's my tip.
Mine is very simple. It's an African word that one of my mentors, Gary Dennis Hines, taught me when I was singing with the Sounds, and we recorded a song with the title Ubuntu, which means I am because we are. You have to, none of us on this panel got to where we are on our own. It was a collective effort from people opening doors, or parents that supported us, or friends, or whoever. We are connected. We are all connected, and none of us can get to where we want to be on our own. I am because we all are. We all share a commonality with each other. And that's what I would love for the graduates to never forget, that we're all connected and we're all related.
Thank you, Aaron. That's pretty inspiring from all of you. And it has been a pleasure. We could go on at length, I think, and take this conversation forward, but I'll wrap this up for the audience today. Thank you, fascinating perspectives. There's more work to do to progress towards the equitable society that we all hope for. I'm an ally, and I hope my colleagues and our graduates will be too. And what we'll do is the team will be in touch for kind of feedback and wrap up. If there's any questions that the audience have, please email us at alumni.shu.ac.uk. I should know that email address well. Thanks for joining us today, and have a great evening.